Benner, much of what I think I know about the concurrent investigations by Congress and DOJ is what I think I understood about the Mueller investigation. What is the dynamic right now, though, between the Select Committee and those ongoing DOJ investigations into the rioters?
See, keep in mind that those are two very separate things. The Mueller investigation, the special counsel's office, that was actually part of the Justice Department. Bob Mueller worked under the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, well, who was recused at the time, but he worked under the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the Deputy Attorney General at the Justice Department. The congressional investigation is separate, it's independent, and it's doing its own work. It's not looking per se at whether or not a criminal case can be proven, which is what Mueller's team was looking at. It was a team of prosecutors. They're trying to really build out the fullest account possible of everything that led up to January 6th, including efforts in the weeks prior to overturn the results of the election. Now, should criminal behavior be discovered from that investigation? Liz Cheney has already said she will kick that over in a referral to the Justice Department. But that is, I think, the best way to look at these two parallel investigations.
Katie, it's clear that the 1-6 committee and Liz Cheney so much as has sort of lent her voice to this line of the inquiry. They've made clear they want to understand what Donald Trump was not doing while the UNTAC unfolded, the dereliction of duty. They also have spent a lot of time with some members of some of these extremist groups. They're looking at, it would appear, what he knew about what they were doing, what their understanding was of what he wanted them to do. Is there any sense that DOJ is also interested in that line of investigation?
Well, dereliction of duty is not really something under the criminal code that the Justice Department would want to charge. You know, Joyce can talk more about that, but that's not necessarily a crime that would be easily charged. What's interesting about the committee's decision to look at dereliction of duty is that it's something that was tossed, sort of bandied around during the second impeachment of Donald Trump right after the January 6th attack. There were people who were putting together the article of impeachment who wondered whether or not it would be smart to do a second article that just looked at dereliction of duty, a far more passive accusation, rather than saying he was proactively inciting the riot, saying he did nothing to stop it, which seemed to some like it would have been an easier bar to meet. Now, that's in the past. We can debate whether or not that would have been a good idea. But certainly it's something that's come up around Trump before. It's coming up again. And I've spoken to people about this, and they say there are a couple of interesting things to note there. One is that, again, it had something that came up in the impeachment conversation. And two, that it speaks to whether or not Trump would be fit to hold office again, which is another debate that's sort of quietly going on in the background amongst political strategists, analysts, people in the Republican Party, saying, hey, should he be the candidate again? And if not, what are the tools at our disposal to make the argument that he would not be the right person?
A lot of Republicans tried and failed to make the argument that he wasn't fit the first time. Joyce, I want to press on this line of investigation by the committee into the extremist groups. And I want to read from the committee's letter to Robert Patrick Lewis, head of the First Amendment Praetorian. They write this. You later claim that you provided security for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn at the Jericho March in Washington, D.C. on December 20th, 2020, and have claimed to coordinate closely and regularly with Lieutenant General Flynn. You've also claimed to coordinate closely with Sidney Powell. On January 7th, 2021, you claim that you were participating in wargaming with constitutional scholars regarding efforts to keep President Trump in office despite Congress's certification of the 2020 presidential election results the day before. You also have claimed to be in contact with Stuart Rhodes, the founder and leader of the Oath Keepers, prior to January 6th. What just based on what is public facing, what is it that they are looking for from these extremist groups?
This is such a funny position to be in, Nicole, because if you had read me that and told me that it was the contents of a DOJ investigation, a look that they were taking into what this group had done, that would have been something that made a lot of sense to me. This would be an effort to show the linkage between some of the groups that were involved in hands-on violence, that were involved in getting people to the Capitol on January 6th, to see if they had tails that reached up into people who were closer to Trump, part of his inner circle. like former General Flynn. But of course, this is part of the January 6th committee's investigation in Congress. And we know that their primary purpose is a congressional, a legislative one. So they're trying to get to the truth of what happened on January 6th in order to figure out whether they need to pass new laws to prevent a reoccurrence, whether there perhaps need to be new criminal statutes where there's some gaps in the law. The reality is that Congress is, in essence, doing DOJ's work, and if they stumble onto crimes in that process, that may well lead to the types of referrals that we've heard Liz Cheney and others mention recently. But this is all about linkages, figuring out who's connected, what the connections were, and essentially, in the language of my people, whether there was some form of a conspiracy underway.
Speaking of linkages, there's been some news made on my friend Hallie Jackson's program, Yamiche. Congressman Adam Schiff has confirmed some reporting from Axios that the January 6th Select Committee has invited one Sean Hannity to voluntarily visit with the committee, chat with them about what he may or may not know. As you all know, I believe his text messages were among the many that Liz Cheney read from, and that data dump that they received from Mark Meadows before he defied the subpoena and was held in criminal contempt of Congress. He did turn over text messages he'd received from Fox News anchors, Trump family members. One of the Fox News anchors was Sean Hannity. And Congressman Adam Schiff confirming that the committee would like for Sean Hannity to voluntarily meet with them. Yamiche, the people close to the president that they are interested in, that they have engaged, is really, really getting closer and closer to Donald Trump.
That's definitely true. You can see that this is a committee that is ramping up its work, that's really trying to close in on that inner circle of President Trump, former President Trump, and to really understand sort of who was talking to him and who he really respected enough to sort of weigh their opinion. And Sean Hannity, for anyone who has covered former President Trump, everyone knows that he is someone who was in the president's orbit. They were speaking regularly. The president really took his sort of advice to heart. It also, in some ways, is a reminder that Fox News, while it's sort of supposed to be a cable news channel, what it really was, and continues to be, is sort of this fringe wing of the GOP, and really the hosts on there, especially the late night opinion hosts on there, they have in some ways turned out to be even more powerful than the elected officials that were trying to talk to former President Trump, including Mitch McConnell and others. So this is really, I think, an interesting move. It really shows that they are trying to understand what former President Trump was thinking, what he was telling people at the time. It's very interesting that this is voluntary. We'll see if this, of course, gets to be a sort of subpoena level. It's unclear what goes on there. But it's interesting to me that Sean Hannity is now having to face a difficult decision here, and whether or not he's going to come in and say, here's what the president told me.
I would think a broadcaster like Sean Hannity would welcome an opportunity to communicate as only he can with the 1-6 committee and a one-time friend, Liz Cheney. Let's listen to what he said to Hallie Jackson. We have that.
Are you looking for information or for cooperation from Mr. Hannity?
Yes, and I think you'll see an announcement about that very soon. We believe that he was texting with the chief of staff and that he has information that would be relevant to our committee. He was more than a Fox host. He was also a confident advisor, campaigner for the former president. And I would hope that if he's asked by the committee, as I expect he will be very soon, that he would cooperate with us.
And that's a voluntary request, just so I'm clear on that?
My understanding, and you'll get confirmation of this very soon, is that we are making a voluntary request that he speak with the committee.
I mean, it goes to reason, Katie Benner, that if they're looking for the voluntary cooperation of Sean Hannity, it might be based on what he was conveying to Mark Meadows, and they might also be interested in the voluntary participation of Laura Ingraham, Donald Trump Jr., all those folks who texted the White House chief of staff and seemed to be under the belief that there was one person who could stop the insurrection, and that was Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And it also speaks to Mark Meadows' role and how little we really know about it. Meadows himself has emerged in many places in the